FM.
Welcome along to another episode of this podcast. We're now in December, and today I'm joined by a new passport member. This one is of Powerchair hockey, and of course, he does other sports as well. Please welcome along Ellis Palmer. Welcome along, Ellis.
How you doing? Pleasure to speak to you, Peter.
Yeah, you too. It was great to see you at the weekend. At the time of recording, it's the early November, and I went to Liverpool to see Ellis and to see Powerchair hockey being done with a little tournament in Greenbank.
Yeah, we had the inaugural GB Power Hockey Association Cup, Straight and Gordon Cup at the weekend, which was wonderful. We had teams from Greenbank. We had two teams from Greenbank. We had a team from Warrington Wolves, team from Widnes Vikings, team from Herald College near Coventry, and team from Martin Furness in Middlesbrough, which was wonderful. It was great to see mix of experienced teams who've played in the league before, but also teams who've not played in competition before, and teams who are just starting up. So it was good to get that variation, really, of players and of skill sets there as we seek to develop power hockey as a sport.
and yes,
Now, I will say it's not power hockey. Your listeners will probably be thinking power hockey that involves sticks. This sport does not involve sticks. It involves a bumper on the chair. In the version we play in this country anyway, it involves a front bumper on the chair with two metal hooks which you use to balance the ball on. And there's a hockey ball, and you've got to balance the hockey ball on the metal hooks. Meanwhile, you've got people smashing into, bumping into, blocking your route to goal, and it's wonderful. It's great. It's a sport. I personally describe it as power rugby because that's what it's a lot more like. To be honest with you, really, it's a lot more physical. It's a bit more brutal than I think people would assume with the power hockey name.
yeah, and the barrier part of it, the front barrier, um, I describe it as similar to Powerchair football barrier.
No, the bumper is
Yeah,
yeah,
the
the bumper
bumper. Yeah,
is not
yeah,
it is different to power chair football in that you have the metal hooks and you have the shooting mechanism. It's more akin, in all honesty, the shape
yeah,
is very, very much akin to what you'd see on a bumper car, if that makes sense,
yeah.
really. But it's made and designed by Power Sports Engineering in Liverpool, who also who also we use the same chairs for power football as power hockey, just with different front bumpers on, basically.
There you go. So there you go. There you have it explained already. Um, and obviously, Ellis, you obviously have cerebral palsy. And you describe yourself as a cat dad. So
Yes, I think it's fair. I think it's fair to describe myself as a cat dad.
yeah,
So I've got quadriplegic dyskinetic cerebral palsy. What does that mean? Basically, it means I had a bleed on my brain when I was a wee one, and that means I have difficulty coordinating my movements, difficulty balancing my movements. I can't walk. I can stand, but I can't walk. Um, I can transfer, but I can't take more than a few steps. Not even a few steps unaided these days, to be honest with you, really. But that's the kind of dynamic. So, and also I have a dodgy right hand. So, in terms of controlling a manual chair, that was never really an option for me in terms of partaking in manual chair sports like manual wheelchair basketball or manual wheelchair rugby or manual wheelchair rugby league. All sports of which I really love to play, but they were never an option for me because honestly, Peter, I'd be going round in circles the whole time and I'd be a danger. With my right hand coming from the air, I'd probably be carted off to the police station within 10 minutes of starting the game for assaulting somebody because it'd be that dangerous, my right hand. Which is why finding power sports, finding power football, first of all at Greenbank and then power hockey was great for me. It was my first. I can cycle around quite a bit, so but individual sports wide and individual health and fitness that was great. But actually, for me, I wanted to do something that was team based, and so finding power football and power hockey was brilliant. But actually, I found well, in all honesty, power football, I found um, possibly a bit too physical with it, really, and I wasn't very good at the kind of 3 meter away rules sort of thing. So Pete Whyman and Jerry Kinsella at Greenbank and Powerchair Engineering both said to me, "Oh, you should look at um, trying out this power hockey." And I thought, me, hockey with a stick, that's not really going to work. So I thought, right, you know, I'll give it a go. I'll give it a go. I'll come down for one session, see how it goes. Lo and behold, I loved it. It was brilliant. Um, because there's no sticks, that is my big fear, the stick element. There's no sticks, which is the front bumper, use the metal hooks to control the ball, and it's brilliant in that regard.
Yeah, I never looked back. Um, so we were speaking, of course, from our journalist backgrounds. Well, more for you than it is for me. But before we get into that, though, um, only years. So school, secondary school, college, all that. Mainstream schools, I would assume.
Yeah, mainstream. Well, actually, special school nursery, mainstream primary school, compre Catholic. We played the Catholic card to get me into a very, very good all-on-one level mainstream Catholic primary school, which is brilliant. And we're going to cover it near me here on Merseyside. And then I went to a comprehensive secondary school on a council estate, which was brilliant, very varied, very diverse student body, and brilliant in that regard. And then I went to a girls' grammar school for sixth form of all places. I went. It was on the same bus route as my high school, so it was perfect in that regard. It was just a bit up the road, so I went there for 2 years, and then I went to Birmingham for uni, studied politics and Spanish as my undergraduate, and then my masters I studied contemporary democracies and nationalism in Barcelona, and then I finished that. I was looking around, was freelancing at Sky Sports at the time, getting paid to watch live football week in, week out, which is brilliant. And about 9 years, almost 9 years ago now, somebody emailed me over BBC and was scheme for disabled journalists. So I applied for it and thought, "Ooh, this might be interesting." And I've been there 8 years working as a journalist on both the online desk of World Online, digital video, editing videos for Instagram and Facebook, and it wasn't TikTok back then, but Twitter and all that element of things. And then about 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago now, I was like, right, I'll take up a gig at the World Service, and did that. And the pandemic happened, and went to Five Live for a bit, and then I'm back at the World Service now. So I cover war, death, famine, and climate change is my day job basically, and news around that. So it's, the day job is very varied, very intense, but it's wonderful. And in my downtime, I do power hockey stuff.
Brilliant. And then uh, you also did University of Brighton.
No, University of Birmingham.
Oh,
Birmingham.
Birmingham, sorry.
Birmingham,
That's right.
Birmingham, and then Barcelona for my masters.
That's
So
it.
yeah.
That's it. And this was so Birmingham was on 2012 to 16. Then you did your MI in 16 to 17. Then you had your job square production 2017 to 25 in various forms. You're still doing it now. Royal service. Um, you and then hand cycling. That's another sport, isn't it? That you
That is
do.
another sport. Yeah, I took it up in the pandemic, to be honest with you. I basically worked loads of overtime at BBC in 2018, 2019. And I've got this good bit of overtime. What should I use it for? And I was over in Ireland visiting a very good friend of mine, Colleen Duffy, who was doing the live streaming of the tournament at the weekend, actually. And we, yeah, we're almost cliff walk from Greystone to Bray. And he turns to me and goes, "Have you thought about hand cycling?" And I was like, "No, what's that?" Because he wanted me to do the Waterford Greenway, which is 40 kilometres. And my batteries will only do 20 kilometres at a time. So I was like, I can't have, I can't take my chair on the Greenway because it's 40 kilometres. I need something else. I thought about hand cycling. So came home, Googled it, And it turns out the guys who make who've made my wheelchairs, my electric wheelchairs that I use for years and years, the Da Vinci Mobility in Liverpool, they also make hand cycles. So I reached out to them when I was getting something done with my chair. I'm like, yeah, we'll give it a go. So they had me go out. Me, my dad, and Vince, the guy who runs the company, were all sat there with like bated breath, thinking, I'm going to fall over at the first thing. And lo and behold, I didn't. So that was January 2020, just before the pandemic started raging, and loved it. It was great, really enjoyed it. And then the bike arrived the 12th of March 2020, literally the week before the UK went into lockdown. And I pretty much went out every day during the pandemic, cycling around my local area here because the roads were quiet. I'd never learned to drive before. So because the roads were quiet, I could learn to cycle on the roads relatively safely. And then as things opened up, I had a bit more road sense in terms of cycling roads. I think I've cycled about 20,000 kilometres in the last 5 years. I've cycled in, yeah, all around this country, from Derby to Hull to Liverpool to London to various places, to Blackpool actually as well. To I've cycled in Ireland, around Ireland, from Belfast to Dublin to Newry, and then also cycled in Europe. So in Barcelona, in the summer actually, in Paris, got stuck in rush hour traffic in Paris, which was an experience, and also in the Netherlands, which was great fun and a very, very inclusive environment for cycling.
And with the hand cycling, you've done tournaments, you've done charter stuff, or
No, with the hand cycling, it's just me. It's purely recreational. It's just purely me going out on my bike, cycling my local streets, doing 30k around my local area, whatever it is, just seeing people, just purely a social side of things. I've done no tournaments, nothing like that. It's just purely me cycling around the streets, using it as a way of getting around. It's brilliant in that regard. I really, really enjoy it. And that's what it's there for. It's there for me just to let off steam when I need to. It's not all about sport. Isn't all about competition. Some of it is also about recreation, and that's important as well.
of course. And it's a bit difficult to do it around your area because you're on a hill. So it's like very sort of
Well, yeah, I've
you
got a
get
little
a
battery
bit of a head
underneath the
start.
seat. Well, I've got a little battery underneath the seat, so when I'm coming back uphill at the end of the cycle, I just boost the battery a little bit. But yeah, it's brilliant. It's great. It's a way of getting around. And obviously, my big concern was, given the nature of my quadriplegic cerebral palsy and my difficulties with my dodgy right hand, which I've already referred to, would I actually be able to grip the hand cycle? And actually, I am. My hand cycle is my right hand's able to grip. Right hand, once it's gripped onto something, is just gripped on for hours and hours at a time, basically, and stays on. Gripped on relatively easily, if that makes sense. That is the big danger. Ooh, would my right arm come flying up in the air? And actually, no, it's not. It's maintained relatively stable. So, smashing that expectation, smashing through that boundary really was really important to me, Peter.
Yeah. Um, and then you is your future all in on GB Power Hockey now? That's your
It's what I
main.
say.
So Power Hockey, GB Power, Powerchair Hockey. Sorry, that's your
No,
main
GB
thing
Power.
now. GB Power. Yeah.
Yeah, mate, I still hand cycle around lots. I'm not gonna lie. I still hand cycle around. I hand cycle to and from my training session most of the time during the summer. The last couple of weeks, where it's been a bit miserable, so I've not been out cycling as much, unfortunately. But it's great. Yeah, so GB Power Hockey is my main thing. It's the way of getting around, and yeah, as a sport, it's great. I mean, just so far this year, I've been to Cardiff and Gloucester and Middlesbrough and obviously Liverpool and Batley in West Yorkshire, and we've got a trip coming up to London later this month. It'll be after this podcast comes out. So, it's all the little things like that, just expanding the sport, expanding what's out there, expanding people's horizons. Because obviously, Powerchair football's got a big market, but for lots of people CP, I don't know about you, Peter, but I struggle to play Powerchair football because of the nature of needing to hit the ball sort of thing.
Mm.
But actually, with the power hockey, it's weird in that you'd think you'd need more control to control a small hockey ball, but actually in some ways you need less. But that specificity of control, which comes quite well with cerebral palsy, is actually really, really the skill you need to play power hockey, which is brilliant.
Yeah. Powerchair football is a bit more, I would say difficult to master because obviously you've got a bigger ball. And
Yes.
so then, yeah. But I mean, I was filming at the weekend, and it was quite difficult to see where the ball was, the hockey ball, because obviously it's the very small one. I was trying to film it, trying to follow it. I was like, where is it now? But yeah,
Mate, for me on the pitch, trying to work out where the ball is difficult enough, especially if it's behind you. It's really not easy. But one thing we have been able to do, thanks to Kookaburra, who make all their hockey balls actually in Corby, in Northamptonshire, we've been able to get some brighter balls, some bright green balls, which are easier to spot than the balls we had previously. So thanks to Kookaburra for supplying us with those luminous bright green balls, it means we're actually able to see where they are on the pitch.
yeah. And the the technology that's for the so you've got the barrier thing. Just I'm gonna put a bit an image here of the mechanism, but it's like a bit like that where the ball goes in, and then you've got a little lever, and it pushes the ball outwards. And that's a technology in itself. Is that a separate switch
It
on?
is, it is, yeah, there's a switch on the side where the chair isn't being controlled by, if that makes sense. I'll be honest with you, I very rarely use the shooting mechanism. Very, very rarely. Just because of the difficulty of me pressing the button at the same time as having the ball in that space is really difficult. I tend to use the side hooks to control and balance the ball a lot more. And there is a way if you get it right that you can use those side hooks to kind of shoot the ball with it, if that makes sense. It's just about mastering it really. I would say doing 100 hours in the chair is really, really important to master the use of the chair.
Yeah, and you don't shoot, you just said. So you're not a striker in some respects.
Yeah, it's interesting. But most of us don't actually shoot the ball, if that makes sense. Most of us actually tend to balance the ball in the hooks just because it's a lot easier to do. You'd only really shoot the ball using that mechanism, probably if you had a clear path in front of you,
Yeah,
because it is unidirectional, if that makes sense, as opposed to kind of bidirectional or omnidirectional. It's that much more difficult to get it to where you want to go.
yeah. And we were talking about I went to, I stayed in your place, lovely place you've got, Alice, by the way. And
Thank you,
obviously
Peter.
you can see a room there, in front of you there. Um, but so you've only recently got that house, didn't you?
Yeah, got it last year and getting it adapted. Got it in May 2024. I mean, getting it adapted, that's always the difficulty, where the money comes in as well, but also getting it adapted, getting the right builders, the right stuff, getting a wet room bathroom put in, getting an accessible kitchen made that works for me. These are all things that take time, take money, take brain time as well in terms of thinking out how you want to do things, how you want to do things. But I think I finally just about got there in terms of getting the bathrooms accessible, getting the kitchen accessible, getting the bedrooms accessible so I can use them and all that. I don't need tons of stuff. I literally just need a wet room bathroom and some bars up on the wall. But getting wet room bathrooms are difficult enough. I mean, getting the kitchen, getting the unit to my level is really, really important. But obviously, you know, as Peter discovered the other day, I don't have a standard dishwasher. I have a space age dishwasher. It's like a tabletop dishwasher because dishwashers are a standard height. So consequently, you have the difficulty of dishwashers a standard height, but that standard height doesn't fit in an accessible kitchen that I need for my chair. So, you can we had this dishwasher, it came, it didn't fit in. So we had to go back and get another dishwasher that fitted at a better height. Well, we had to rethink the whole dishwasher situation and get a tabletop dishwasher and get it installed in a cupboard and then get it plumbed in. So there's all the little things like that that you don't think about when you're trying to make a house accessible, but they're all barriers you come up against. But just things you've got to think about. I mean, we're used to thinking on our feet as disabled people, aren't we, really?
Yeah. And well, not even on our feet, but yeah. Um,
Yeah,
um,
on our footrests, I guess you might say.
Yeah. Of course you've got a lovely B&B nearby. So that's that. A little shout out to Ashburton guest house there. Um and then so before you got this house, you were
Yeah.
presumably you with the parents.
Yeah, I did live with my parents. I lived in London for a time, working BBC New Broadcasting House as well in London. So I lived in London for a time, and pandemic happened, and I moved back home. And when I was in London, I was always at home. 'Cause I'm a big Man City fan. I've got a Man City season ticket, so I was always at home watching City at weekends at the Etihad sort of thing with my mum.
Nice. Um and why City?
Good question. Because if I'm honest with you, when I was 8, I think I went along to Main Road and they had a lift that led to a raised platform. And at the time, very, very few grounds had raised platform seating for wheelchair users. And I was mesmerized. This is incredible. This is brilliant. I used to go to Liverpool and Everton and Tranmere, being my local teams. I've also now got a season ticket for Tranmere as well. That's another story. But couldn't get a season ticket for Liverpool for love nor money. Everton at the time at Goodison, the facilities weren't great. So City at the time had a brand new stadium, and that was that. And we went to the ground, and it was great. We were at the old ground at Main Road and loved it. It was great. Always had an affinity with City, with them back then being the underdogs in Manchester, sort of thing. That was brilliant. And then 23 years ago, we applied for a season ticket, got on the waiting list before I would get a ticket. Okay, no problem. But my dad, Rob Palmer, works for Sky. Then went to interview John Wardle, who's been the chairman at City. And Mr. Wardle was very proud of his new ground, very proud of his new accessible seats. And Mr. Wardle comes and goes, yeah, I'm going to show you these accessible seats. Well, this is how it's going to be, blah, 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 blah. And my dad says, right, that's great. But John, if I stand up in front of you, can you see? So I'm going to stand up. I said, he scored a goal. Can you see? And my dad did the same, and he couldn't see past Mr. Wardle. So Mr. Wardle then called up the site manager and was like, we've got a situation here. Wheelchair users can't see if somebody stands up in the front of them. So the club then had to do a whole body of work about raising up the seats to a certain height so wheelchair users could see above anybody who was standing up in front of them. And Mr. Wardle had said, you know, you see this seat here for your lad. He said, is there anything we can do? He said, well, my lad's on the waiting list at City. He said, right, you see this seat here, this will be your lad's seat. And that was my seat for 15, 16 years. And then we made it corporate and we just moved to the other side of a hospitality box now, where we've sat for the last 7 or 8 years. I've had my season ticket at City for 2003, so what's that, 22, 23 years now, really. It's brilliant in that regard. But football's all about the community, it's all about the social capital, and it's about rare space where non-disabled people and disabled people can come together when the accessibilities are right, and football can really be a melting pot of a town, of a city, of a community.
And at City, obviously you've got the accessible that where you've got they've recently introduced sensory rooms, haven't they, for people with autism?
Yeah, City have had a sensory suite, I think, the
Yeah.
last 3, 4 years at least, maybe even a little bit earlier than that, and it's great, it's brilliant. And many clubs have that now. It's becoming more and more of a thing because clubs are realising the gap, the barrier that faces. I know Liverpool have a great sensory room that the Liverpool DSA is very, very well involved in. Ted Morris at LFC is brilliant in that regard. And, you know, I see the work that Liverpool do their sensory room. I see the work that City do their sensory room. And you go, wow, that's brilliant. That's great. They're able to do that because they've got hospitality boxes, they've got space and everything like that. But difficulty is, the further you get down the pyramid, in some ways, the more as well as socially isolated the fans tend to be at football league grounds, the more difficult it is for those clubs to find space to put in a sensory room. So lots of those clubs miss out on the opportunity to have autistic or neurodivergent supporters able to come to games. So I think that's really, really important to acknowledge as well. But at the higher levels of the game, clubs are able to put in these facilities. But at the lower levels of the game, it's a lot more difficult for clubs to put in those facilities. And another hat, I'm the chair of the Tranmere Rovers Disabled Support Association, Disabled Support for Tranmere Rovers Disabled Support Association, Disabled Rovers. So doing a lot of work with that club as well around, perhaps they can make big sensory packs or blankets for wheelchair using supporters or improving signage or improving toilets or something like that. But a whole body of work that's got to be done around football ground accessibility and sensory rooms, improving raised level seating, improving things like lift maintenance as well, which can greatly affect disabled supporters' experience on a match day, improving also, accessible catering options as well are really, really important. So
Yeah.
disabled supporters, we have the right to be consumers the same as everybody else, really. But oftentimes you find that catering options at football grounds aren't terribly accessible for disabled supporters.
Yeah. Well, the roles isn't made for accessible either. But that's another conversation. And
Sorry, what were you going to say, Peter? Go on. What were you going to say? What, sorry, isn't accessible?
I was just saying that the world isn't accessible for us either.
Oh
That's a whole
God, no, the
different
world, the
conversation.
world isn't accessible. But as I said earlier on, football can be that microcosm where disabled supporters and non-disabled supporters meet, especially for disabled supporters who are maybe more socially isolated. It's their social activity of the week, where they do with their PA or their family member or something like that, and it can be that meeting point. And actually, it can be. I've had so many people come to me and go, "Oh my God, I didn't realise our ground at Tranmere, so for example, was so inaccessible," sort of thing, because it's an opportunity to open their eyes, to have that melting pot, to have that meeting point, to have that conversation, really.
Well, that's a good point because you showed me the train. Well, you told me about the underground sort of like
Oh,
ramp, the electric ramps.
well,
Get
I'll come to this actually. We're having a chat
yeah,
about whether it was better for Peter to get the bus or get the train.
yeah.
And his maps thing on his phone was showing it was easier to get the bus. But I said, look, get the train. Because on Merseyside, with Merseyrail, since 2020, it's been ongoing since about 2020, but at least since late 2023, early 2024, we've had level boarding on the Merseyrail trains in Merseyside. There's a little ramp, there's a little ramp that comes out automatically. Which bridges the gap between the train and platform. There's no need for a ramp to be deployed by a staff member. You can just get on, get off the same as everybody else. When I used to get the train in Merseyrail, Peter, I used to have to go down to the platform, press the information button, say, "Hi, there's a wheelchair user here to get on the train. Could you bring a ramp out?" And they'd say, "Yeah, you'll be on the train in 15 minutes." So they'd come down, bring the ramp out, get on the train in 15 minutes. And then there'd be somebody to bring the ramp out. But obviously, that's time cost being a disabled person that you don't always have, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
to have the level boarding and not have that time cost, to be able to get on and get off the train the same as everybody else is brilliant. And also, the other thing you might not have noticed in the bus trains is there's two wheelchair user seats. There's four
Yes.
carriages, but there's two wheelchair user positions in two separate carriages. So that means that two wheelchair users are able to travel on the same train at the same time as everybody else. Whereas oftentimes, with lots of train companies, there's only one wheelchair user space on regional services, and it then becomes that much more difficult to travel with friends or with family or whatever sort of thing. And that's the brilliant element of it, really, of having been overboarding. Merseyrail really thought it through. There's a bit more work to be done about getting all the stations to have lifts and everything like that. But actually, the massive progress in having overboarding on Merseyside is brilliant, and hopefully, the rest of the country will be able to follow suit.
Fingers crossed. And is there anything else you want to be put in before I go on for the final question?
I think just with the power hockey, I think we're developing sport. We're trying to develop. So if anybody's interested in giving our sport a go, we explained it. It is a physical. It's a fast-paced, dynamic contact sport, mostly played by people with disabilities. Affects all full limbs. And if people are thinking, oh, maybe Powerchair football is not for me, or something like that, you know, have a look on our YouTube channel, GB Power Hockey. Be careful when you go to Google because it does show up a version of the stick game, Powerchair Hockey, which is played in Europe, but actually we don't play it with the stick game. So actually, look up and see the sport. Look up and see if it's accessible. I mean, get in touch. My email is epalmer.gbpowerhockey@gmail.com. And just give us an email if you'd like to do a taster session in your part of the country. So we can expand the sport, so we can develop it. We start off with a taster session and then see if we can go from there. We're particularly interested in talking to rugby league clubs and rugby union clubs who've maybe got a big following in terms of disabled supporters, but they don't currently have a sport that's available to Powerchair users.
And with with that one, there's not just disabled people can play it. You're allowed to have one non-disabled player on the team as well.
Yeah, you are. You're allowed to have
Yeah,
one person who's classification three on the team, but then you have to balance it out by having a couple. So your classification one is like quadriplegic, basically. My difficulties with dexterity, controlling the chair, etc. So I'm a one. Then you've got a two, which is somebody who might be able to control, say, a wheelchair, a rugby league wheelchair or a wheelchair basketball chair, for example. There are two, and then you're three in terms of a classification system. There are somebody who's a non-disabled player, non-physically disabled player, anyway.
yeah. So it's quite nice that having that balance. And final question for you, Alice. Um, what tips or advice would you give to somebody that has cerebral palsy?
I would give just the general tips I'd give to anybody with a physical disability, really, which is, just you chart your own path, really, unfortunately. There isn't a black book that is out there as a disabled person, really. When it's accessing resources, accessing sport, be that in education, be that in healthcare, be that in sport, whatever it may be, you kind of got to make it up as you go along. But find the resources that are out there. There might not be something in the community. If there's not something in your community, get in touch with an organisation like the Wheelchair Football Association or us at GB Power Hockey and see if they might be open to doing a taster session in your local area so you can get a sense of numbers. And then take it from there. See if there's a local sports club or a local disability group, for example, who might be interested in being involved and then take it from there, really. Because you never keep the world's your oyster. And I think sport for disabled people is so, so important. And it's kind of one of my favourite things I talk about is social capital and that need to build social capital. And oftentimes, disabled people, we are quite socially isolated because particularly people with CP, because there isn't a big kind of community resource network out there for us that we can access. So we are kind of on our own a little bit, and you are kind of making it up as you go along a little bit. So actually, may find a sports club, find some people, find some people who might be interested in the sport, and then take it from there. See if they're interested, and then do a taster session, build up the sport, build up your love for the sport, and kind of take it from there. But I think also, you know, the biggest gap for me with disabled people, especially people with quadriplegic conditions, is that they tend to do okay in the education system these days. Oftentimes, in mainstream education, and that's great, that's wonderful. They get to university, that's great, that's wonderful, that's fab. But then there is a gap, there is a 21, 22 gap where people finish their undergraduate degree, maybe they go on to do a postgraduate degree or something like that. But then when they finish that postgraduate degree, all too often, there aren't the employment opportunities out there for people to be able to access the workplace and access, say, accessible housing, for example. And it's that knock on because university accommodation is oftentimes so accessible to because it has to be. Say, for example, really, when it comes to then moving to a city or moving out from your parents or something like that, you suddenly found there isn't the accessible accommodation. And if your parents live in a village or in a small town where the employment opportunities for disabled graduates, especially, are going to be limited, then you then end up in a really difficult situation where actually, how do you access the employment opportunities out there? It's then really difficult. And then you become socially isolated. Your peers' lives move on. They form relationships. They have employment opportunities and everything like that. And actually, that's really, really difficult. That's why something I'm mad keen on is kind of remote working opportunities. I think are really important because that allows people to have, particularly if they're living in a small town or a small city where the employment opportunities are limited, that allows people the opportunity to do work, to have the conversations that we're having today, but also keep their PA network without having to register with a different local council, or keep their family members nearby so that they're able to support them with whatever they need. And these are things that really help disabled people have build that social capital through the workplace, then through recreation and leisure, then through, relationships and friendships and everything like that, and through broader society. And these are things that are really important, but I think the broader society often doesn't time to think about, really, if that makes sense.
Well, that's a great tip. Thank you very much for coming on, Alice.
Thank you very much, Peter. Great to speak to you.
Voice. Let's go. Voice FM.